What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Today I'm taking a chunk of Coruscant and giving it the Fountain of Youth treatment. Here's a little backstory. I love to build big old Lego Star Wars MOCs, and one of the problems with that is I finish a giant build and it's awesome and I had fun, but I have nowhere to display it and I need the pieces for the next one. So what I've started doing is, before I take a MOC apart, I save a little chunk or side build as a memento or physical relic that I can look back on later to remember the MOC with. In the beginning, I was saving real simple stuff like a small side build or a little creature, but I've gotten to the point where I'm saving entire sections or chunks of the build and turning them into their own display pieces. And now it's Coruscant's turn. In this video, I'm going to decide which part of Coruscant to save and figure out how to turn it into its own standalone MOC in order to immortalize Coruscant forever. But that's everything you need to know, so if you're ready for one last look at Coruscant, don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button, and let's get started. Of all the large-scale MOCs I've done, I had the most options for keeping something built with this one, because all of the large builds up to this point have been flat battlefields or rock walls and small cities, which don't provide a lot of cool options for mementos or mini builds. But Coruscant is different, with so many smaller builds in it, like the skyscrapers, barracks, armory, the sky bridge, or even one of the plateaus or steps. What I'm looking for is something cool, sturdy, and interesting that can stand on its own, but most importantly represents the masterpiece and what Coruscant was as a build. I think one of the skyscrapers, while cool, doesn't really capture what I want to, being kind of plain and more of a backdrop build, and the sky bridge would be kind of hard to turn into its own strong standalone MOC with the two separate halves. That leaves us with the armory, some steps, or one of the plateaus. I ultimately decided to go with one of the plateaus because it checks all of the boxes and is part of my favorite section of the MOC, the grand steps that lead up to the Senate building. The armory, while cool, is more of a generic clone structure that could be part of any number of MOCs, but the plateaus are unique to this MOC and help represent part of the Senate building. There's also the little section of steps on top of the plateau, so I get to represent a portion of those as well. I will, however, keep the armory built, but probably in storage for a while. That way I can use it as a story prop or part of a future MOC. Now that I know what I want to use, it's time to pull it out and turn it into a standalone build, which means a little minor destruction is needed. Just kidding, I specifically built these plateaus and the surrounding steps in a way that each section can be removed without breaking anything surrounding it, which really came in handy when I had to move this entire build to my new place. Really, the biggest thing to do with the plateau is take out all of the filler brick that was covered up by the steps and replace it with some light bluish gray brick so the whole thing matches. A big reason why I picked this section is because of the statues. I really liked how they looked and wanted to keep a decent few built, plus this will be a good build for displaying or reviewing minifigs in the future. I decided to plate off the bottom of the MOC. I was going to leave it open, but I think having at least one ring of plate around the edge will really help strengthen the base of this MOC and help everything connect together better, and will make moving it a lot easier. I've thought about selling off the different sections of Coruscant that I was considering earlier to people maybe who are interested in having a chunk of it on display, but I don't really know how to price them or if anybody would actually buy them. One thing I didn't plan on was how long this MOC was going to be. When picturing it, I only focused on the actual plateau and didn't really think about the extra length the steps would add, so I may have to take some of those off. Now that the core structure is done, the statues can go back in, and I decided to keep the broken statue with the debris around it because I like that destroyed look, and it'll be a good reminder that this was Coruscant during the Clone Wars, a war that reached the very steps of the Senate building. I figured this would be a good way to display my boy Palpatine and some of his Senate guards, plus I can add other figs in the back like Commander Fox. I'm still a little unsure of the steps. They ended up adding a lot of length to this, like I said earlier, which will only make it harder to display, but the steps were such a cool part of the MOC that I really wanted to represent them as best I can. I think this is a great representation of what Coruscant was and the best section to keep built. But let me know in the comments if you think this was the right choice or if I should have picked something else. Here's one last look at the remnants of Coruscant, just kind of give you guys an update of what's going on, how soon this will be taken apart next, and like when the next MOC is coming. So I'm about 60 to 70% done. You can see apartment complex, base, a lot of the road, entertainment, just so much of it's gone. It's really just the bank and the Senate building with the steps up in front, minus the plateau I just yoinked out of there. I'm really happy with how quickly and smoothly this thing has been coming apart. It was a very organized and grid-like MOC, and so taking it apart in sections has been a very organized and easy process. Like you can see, I can basically just focus on one section, and because 90% of this MOC is the same pieces, gray plates, bricks, slopes, and tiles, I can just keep the same bins out all the time and just slowly fill them up, get new bins, which has been awesome. So this has been a very fun and very easy teardown process. As far as what's going on next, I think I'm going to keep the Senate building built for a little while just because I really like it and I want to enjoy it. And the next mock won't need this extra table. The only reason this mock needed is because I needed room for the Senate building, but that's not going to be an issue in the next one. So I'm thinking about moving that Senate building up over here onto the table and then scooting that out of the room. That way I can get started on the clone armies, the droid army showcases, and then into the next big build, because this is where all of that needs to happen. We do have a few things hiding over here at the back. We've got a couple random mocks. Here are all the clones that were in Coruscant, and then we've got like the skyscrapers, buildings, and skybridge and stuff. I removed this and set it back here because the big thing for me now is clearing out these tables so I can get those other videos out. And smaller stuff like this I can store easily. I can kind of take apart at my leisure. So I do have some of these smaller builds floating around, but for the most part, all the big structures that were here have been taken apart and sorted, or the pieces have been sold. You can see this Senate building is just going to be a doozy to take apart. That's part of the reason why I don't want to do it, is because, this is a tiring, wearing process regardless of how organized and easy it is. So I think it'll be nice to clear out the bulk of this mock, take a little bit of a break, and then tackle the Senate building instead of trying to do it all at once. I think mentally it'll be a lot easier that way. I would say I'm sorry to see it go, but at this point it's such a big mess. I'm just happy to be able to get it all cleaned up and start on the next project. And speaking of the next project, let's talk about when that's happening. Well, this video officially marks the end of the Coruscant era here on Coconut Brick Studios. I've got no more videos to make with it. It's time to turn my sights forward to the next one. I have a brand new big old mock series planned, and while it will have some similarities to Coruscant, it'll also be its own mock and different in many ways. And I'll get to tackle some cool new challenges and build things in a way that I've never done before, which is always one of the goals with these projects, because I don't want to keep giving you the same mock over and over again. You might have noticed that all of my large-scale mocks over the past 3 years have centered around Star Wars Episode 3, specifically the end of the Clone Wars, but I'm breaking that pattern with this next one and going all the way back to the beginning of the Clone Wars and building a battle that I have loved ever since I first saw it as a kid. I'll be announcing specifically what that project is and when it'll be starting next week, so make sure to stay tuned, get hyped, and I will catch you in the next video. But until then, happy building.